you, Adrian, and good evening to everyone. I too would like to acknowledge and extend my respects to any First Nations people attending the call tonight, and acknowledge that I am joining you today from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people in Melbourne. If you see my backdrop here, I'm in a field or a crop of kangaroo grass on Dja Dja Wurrung country. I was really happy to receive a reach out from Adrian a few weeks back, inviting me to join and do a bit of a presentation on kangaroo grass tonight to a group of people who are probably equally as passionate and interested in kangaroo grass as me, perhaps arguably even more. Kangaroo grass is a species I knew very little about until my PhD, which commenced 4 years ago. I grew up on a farm on Wiradjuri country in the Riverina region of New South Wales, near Wagga Wagga. I grew up in a time of the Millennium Drought and kind of saw firsthand the impacts of that on farming and our cropping food systems. So from a young age, I kind of saw the kind of devastation that climate could have on our contemporary cropping systems, which made me want to pursue a career where I could help contribute towards, in some way, overcoming those challenges and working with farmers. It wasn't until my last year of my Bachelor of Agricultural Science degree at Charles Sturt University, where I was fortunate enough to travel to Papua New Guinea to do my honours research, looking at the crop protection of sweet potato weevils. So sweet potato being a major crop up in PNG, and working with kind of local farming communities up there, it made me reflect kind of for the first time the first time more deeply on the connection that Papua New Guineans and the Indigenous people of New Guinea had with the land and their food production systems. And it made me kind of reflect on my upbringing on a farm here in Australia and just the Australian agricultural industry more generally. And it really was a moment of realization for me at how kind of, the farming systems in our country are really detached from any Indigenous practices, and even reflecting on my family history. So both my parents are from generational farming families, and how my family history kind of prospered on dispossessed land. So there was a feeling of kind of guilt and shame that came with that in a way. And that kind of led me a bit of a pivot, and I wanted to pursue kind of a career where I could, I guess, in a process of reconciliation, see what I can do to help our farming systems become a bit more, led by First Nations people, because in agriculture, such little benefit of Australian agriculture industry goes to, First Nations people. So then COVID came along, and at the same time, a PhD was advertised by La Trobe University, and it was a project that was being led by DJAARA, the traditional owner group representing the Dja Dja Wurrung people of Janduck or Central Victoria. And they reached out to La Trobe University at the time to seek a PhD candidate to support them in their vision to develop Demeter triandra kangaroo grass, also known as Bawachi in Djaara language, which refers to seed grasses that produce seed. They wanted, to partner with La Trobe, and more so the team there. So Professor James Hunt, John Morgan, to look at, how can we kind of grow kangaroo grass as a contemporary broadacre crop. So I'll just share some my slides with you if I can. Everyone got that one, Adrian? Yep, perfect. So that led to my PhD thesis titled Supporting the Development of Kangaroo Grass, Dja Dja Wurrung into a Contemporary Perennial Seed Crop in Southeastern Australia. So I touched on a little bit there. DJAARA reached out to La Trobe, and now my principal supervisor, James Hunt, in the top left-hand corner there, moved to University of Melbourne, so ended up completing most of my PhD here at University of Melbourne. The project received funding through at the time, Australian Government Department of Ag, Water and the Environment. It's since changed name since then, but that was a part of, I think, one of their land care kind of programs. My PhD supervisory team, I was so fortunate to have incredible expertise and guidance throughout my PhD. So Professor James Hunt on the top left, and Professor Dr. Corinne Celestina on the right, both crop physiologists. Bottom left-hand corner is a photo of me with a very young kangaroo grass plant there, and Dr. Doran Gupta from up at University of Melbourne Dookie campus. And some of you may recognize, I believe he also did a previous Grassy Talks in that bottom right corner, Dr. John Morgan. Looking very happy there in a stand of kangaroo grass. So what is kangaroo grass? Many of us will know, but I'll just go through some quick little points. So referred to Bawachi in DJAARA language, it's a C4 perennial tussock grass, C4 meaning it's a warm season grass. So it grows mostly in spring and summer, and then goes into a state of dormancy during the winter months across Dja Dja Wurrung country and southern Australia. Talking about its size, it's quite a kind of prolific, prominent tussock grass. It's about 0.5 meters wide and can grow up to 2 meters tall. On Dja Dja Wurrung country, the kangaroo grass that we grew was mostly under 1.5 meters tall. Dja Dja Wurrung is one of 27 species in the Dja Dja genus, and it has a global distribution. So it's native to Australia, but it's not only found here. It first originated in Asia and an estimated 1.5 million years ago, and has spread, and it's found in Africa. So a lot of the literature on kangaroo grass comes from South Africa. It's found in New Guinea and across Australia. It's known as a keystone species, which means that it can determine the function, structure, and composition of kind of the ecosystem where it's found. So it's a really kind of important species in grasslands. Here is just an image from the Living Atlas of Australia that just shows recordings of Dja Dja Wurrung across Australia. And I've also highlighted where Jandak or Dja Dja Wurrung country is there. And you can see that right across our part of the world, Victoria, Dja Dja Wurrung, there's plenty of recordings. So it's historically quite prominent in this part of the world. But you can also see that it is very widely distributed. So although it's one species, there's many different ecotypes or accessions of kangaroo grass, and different ecotypes can have traits or characteristics that confer advantages in different environments, which I might touch on a bit later. So just looking at a bit of the seed, as the seed is kind of the focus, seed production is the focus of kind of this research. We're wanting to grow kangaroo grass as a seed production crop. So I've kind of left the plant and the culms out, looking at the spikelet on the left there. So that what bears the seed diaspore in the middle there. So I'm sure many of us have seen the kangaroo grass seed diaspore. Often we just call that a seed. The diaspore just meaning that that's the structures that help in the dispersal of the seed. And on the right there, we've got the naked kind of seed, the caryopsis, or you could call the grain if you're thinking about it in a potentially a food context. Here is a picture from one of the field sites, my research field sites out on Dja Dja Wurrung country, after we planted some tube stock and they grew quite quickly and shed some seed diaspores. You can see that the role of the awn is to disperse the seed along the ground. So changes in humidity or rainfall causes the awn to twist. And so when it falls to the ground, that movement helps the seed find suitable microsites for germination on the ground. So you can see here that there's a crack in the soil and you can see the awns sticking out there, which is one of the really cool things to kind of actually observe when you're out in the field, just how the cracks can just be filled of the seed diaspores. So yeah, if it gets wet or moisture increases, that causes the awn to straighten out. If it dries, it causes it to twist, and that changing and alternating moves the seed. So grasslands and grassy woodlands, what are they? You could probably tell me better than I could tell you. And there's lots of different definitions, but the one I just use here is quite basic. Grasslands are dominated by plant families such as Poaceae grasses and Asteraceae and Fabaceae, forbs. Grassy woodlands are similar, but with trees and shrubs. So you can see I've got a photo on this slide of a remnant stand of kangaroo grass on southern Dja Dja Wurrung country. And I would say a stand like this, it's quite impressive and quite rare. As a lot of us will know, because of, a lot of land disturbances, Western agriculture, we have lost a lot of our native grasslands, and kangaroo grass is largely restricted to remnants like this, but more so to undisturbed areas such as railway corridors or old unused cemeteries. Well, not unused, but old original cemeteries. So it's not really, it's rare to see big areas of kangaroo grass. Both grasslands and grassy woodlands are major terrestrial biomes. They hold significant ecological and economical importance. In terms of, I guess, that economical importance and use of grasslands today for humans, a lot of the grasslands, I mean, historically and today, are used for the provision of natural resources. So that was very much the case pre-colonization for thousands of years and Aboriginal use. So grasslands could provide many different natural resources such as food. Even when you're thinking about plants, there were native food plants cultivated, harvested and processed. Today, unfortunately, in a way that grasslands make productive agricultural lands. So today, our native grasslands have been replaced and kind of supplanted with exotic introduced plant species. And in agriculture, that's a lot of annual cropping species, such as, I guess, wheat, canola, depending where you are, and exotic pasture species for grazing. So why research kangaroo grass as a perennial seed crop? Here's just a few points here. The big overarching leading point for this project was that DJAARA want kangaroo grass back in the landscape. I won't really speak myself for DJAARA on this and just keep it quite basic, just like this, because they can speak to it much better than I can. But a big thing is about promoting healthy country. So kangaroo grass existed across Dja Dja Wurrung country. It's largely disappeared now as part of that building back the healthy country. They want kangaroo grass back to support that. There's also the provision of socio-economic opportunities supportive of traditional owner self-determination. So there's a lot of that kind of, economic opportunity that can come from production of native food plants for First Nations groups if done right, which is something that's very much been a focus for this project. And there's that, inherent cultural significance, the deep connection that First Nations people have to country. In another kind of economic sense, the commercial value of seed product is currently very high, up to $1,000 per kilogram of kangaroo grass seed and awn product. I think it's dropped a little bit the last time I checked a couple of the commercial suppliers, down to around $700-800, but there's still that high cost due to, I guess it's a supply demand thing. And there's very little, kangaroo grass isn't kind of commercially grown on a large broadacre scale really anywhere in Australia. It's mostly limited to small commercial growers, and a lot of the seed that is harvested or sent away to nurseries for rearing is also from remnant populations. There's also farming system benefits and ecosystem services that kangaroo grass can provide as well. As a perennial grass, it's year-round coverage, so that can potentially benefit farming and ecosystems, and there's also potential grazing value as well. So early on in the PhD, got together with DJAARA, Rodney Carter, the CEO, and the project managers at the time for the project, which was called the Dja Dja Wurrung project. That's what DJAARA named it, and that translates to country healing its home. We got together with them and wanted to kind of figure out what were the priority research questions we wanted to kind of address. And the overarching kind of theme was improved establishment and seed production. This fed into my first chapter for my PhD being a literature review chapter. And then under that came 3 research chapters that tried to address different establishment and seed production research questions. So I'm going to go through each of those papers briefly now, talk about some of the findings, briefly touch on the methods and things like that, but hopefully share some kind of valuable findings that we found in this project. So the literature review chapter, I've just put kind of a photo there of the title and the abstract. So it's so far the one of my only PhD chapters that's been published, and then other couple are pending, under review, or still in preparation. But the literature review was mainly aimed at looking at what literature is out there on kangaroo grass. Most of it is has an ecological and restoration focus, and rightly so. But there was very little in terms of its use as an agricultural crop. So trying to find and identify what we know from that literature about things like the genetic, environment, and management determinants of its growth and development and seed production, and then putting that through a lens of, okay, if we grow this as a crop, then if these studies have been done and it's been found that kangaroo grass likes to grow in these conditions or this condition, how can that inform its crop production? A big thing was to identify key agronomic possibilities and constraints to its seed production, to then provide some guidance into what future research can be done. Just one of the figures in that paper is the annual development cycle of Themata triandra relative to months of years on Dja Dja. So that's just a figure. I'm not artistic at all that I tried to map out, but just showing that as a C4 summer grass, it kind of reaches maturity in December, January, and that's when seed shed kind of happens. And then during the winter cooler months, it goes into a dormant state. I think this photo behind me was sometime in spring, so just before seed shed. So looking at some agronomic possibilities to kangaroo grass as a crop, I'll just touch on these briefly. As a perennial grass, low input, farmers don't have to go and plant it every year like they do a wheat or canola crop. Produces high value seed. It's widely adapted to different environments. Improved seed yield for effective management strategies. So we identified, from some of the literature, potentially some effective management strategies. So using things like biomass management, fire, things like that may improve seed production if we understand that a bit more. Contribute towards healthy country and farming system benefits, as I briefly mentioned before. There's a little bowl there of kangaroo grass seed and grain. So yeah, I don't think I've really said, but Dja Dja Wurrung, a big output in terms of the seed is seed for revegetation, restoration markets. So kind of that seed for replanting purposes. And there's also an interest in the seed for human consumption, like a lot of other native grasses in Australia. The seed can be made into kind of a flour product. And yeah, has been quite a bit of research come out the last couple of years, even since I started my PhD, on the nutrition of native seeds. But there's plenty of constraints to broadacre establishment and seed production of kangaroo grass, and they're all pretty similar to trying to restore kangaroo grass, which has been done in restoration projects. So ideally, to establish large areas on the paddock scale, farmers like to use seed, but you can see in that top photo there of me holding kind of like a fir ball of kangaroo grass seed. There's issues with all those structures and processing that seed to get it to flow through machinery that can allow it to be spread or seeded in like conventional ways. There's germination requirements. So kangaroo grass seed needs warm temperatures and higher soil moisture to germinate. And it can be difficult to get both of those to coincide sometimes, most of the time in Southern Australia. So that's a challenge. And there's also dormancy imposed on the seed as well. So poor seed quality. It's renowned for low viability and high dormancy. Weed competition is a big one. So all the exotic, the soils across agricultural lands are, completely full mostly of weed seeds in the soil. So that can really outcompete kangaroo grass when looking to establish a crop. There's also limited agronomic knowledge of the genetic environment and management factors that contribute towards seed production. So there was a list of, from that, we identified a list of future research needs. I looked at them in priority. I tried to prioritize them, but there was kind of 3 that fed into my next chapters, and that was to improve upon current sowing and harvest methodologies, improve weed management, and identify ecotypes with agronomically important traits preferable for cropping. So research chapter 1 was titled Seed Harvest and Sowing Timing Determine Successful Establishment of Kangaroo Grass on Dja Dja Wurrung Country. And probably really anywhere. We wanted to include Dja Dja Wurrung Country as an acknowledgement that that's where our work was conducted. So the aim of this chapter and experiment was to investigate the effect of harvest timing on seed viability and what characteristics can indicate optimal harvest timing. So I got a map there of Victoria, Dja Dja Wurrung Country, and where this experiment was conducted. It was seed was collected across 8 harvest dates over 3 seed shed seasons from a remnant population and tested for viability. We also collected data on the pattern of seed shed over the 2 seasons. So collected the seed in trays and checked at regular intervals to try to understand the pattern of seed shedding. As I mentioned before, seed kangaroo grass seed has high levels of dormancy. So when we wanted to determine seed viability, we had to do two tests. To test for total seed viability, we need to know how many seed are non-dormant and dormant. So the first test we did was standard germination testing. So putting the seed in optimal conditions for, or preferable conditions for germination, and you'd get a set amount of seed germinate for each of the different harvest dates. But just because some seed may not have germinated doesn't mean that it's not viable. It could just have dormancy imposed. So to test for dormancy, we then did a second test called the tetrazolian test. And that's where you add the seed into a colorless solution and incubate for 24 hours, and living cells will be stained red, which indicates respiring cells. And looking at that pattern of staining, you can determine what seeds are viable. And that gives you the total seed viability. Anything that didn't germinate or didn't test red in that was considered unviable, and most of those didn't even have a caryopsis or a seed in them anyway. A lot of the seed diaspores can be empty. So some of the key findings, there's just 3 figures there from the 3 seasons, and it kind of has the percentage on the y-axis and the dates on the x-axis. I missed doing the seed shedding pattern in the first season, but we've got it there on the next 2 seasons. And you can see that kind of shaded area, the lightly shaded is the percentage of viable seed that's dormant, and the darker is the percentage of viable seed non-dormant. And you can see, especially in those 2 last seasons, that the percentage of viable seed dormant is kind of a significant proportion of the seed. So you could, I guess, if you harvested that seed, and you could be like, oh, this seed, it's not very viable at all, but it could be that there's just high dormancy in the seed. The last season had much lower viability. That season was much wetter and had a lot more cloud cover than the previous couple of seasons. So we think that could have something to do with why viability was low, but it kind of shows that viability can vary between seasons. So the seed shed at this population mid-December to late January. The seed viability increased through seed shed, which was a big finding. So early in the seed shed, when seeds first started to drop, seed had very low viability, and it tended to peak when most seed had actually shed. So those last few seed tended to be, when you harvest on the plant, the most viable. So 68, there's a bit of a typo, but 68 to 69% was when peaked in the first 2 seasons, but lower in the last season. I'll also just point out that there was a strong correlation between seed viability and seed with a caryopsis. So if you find a seed and it's filled, then yeah, we found that that's likely to be viable, but there could be dormancy imposed. Similarly, seed viability and seed color correlated as well. So or seed that was had a caryopsis, and if it was dark and black, tended to be viable. Anything that was white was never viable. But in saying that, a lot of seed diaspores that were black and had a black awn too, if they were, a lot of those were empty. So for a viable seed is always black, but a black seed diaspore isn't necessarily always viable if it hasn't got a seed in it. Experiment 2 of this chapter aimed to quantify how time of sowing affects establishment and whether establishment varies between site, ecotype, and year. So we conducted 2 experiments at 2 different sites, Barringup and Dean. They both vary in climate. So Dean is down closer to Ballarat. In the hills there, it's cooler, higher rainfall than Barringup, which is up near the Kangaroo, a bit closer to Bendigo, and it's usually hotter and drier. So we wanted Dja Dja Wurrung wanted to kind of test the kind of difference across their country. And we used two different ecotypes. So and seed from an ecotype or population up at Bort, so northern Dja Dja Wurrung country, and from down East Smeaton, southern Dja Dja Wurrung country. So here is just a bit of the methodology. So there was 8 sowing dates throughout the year from March through to December. And you can kind of see the different seasons there and phenology of the natural stands. So during autumn, it's kind of the end of the growth season, dormant during that winter period, and early growth season during spring. So I planted pretty much 50 seed I deemed viable. So I felt them, and if they were full and were black, then I planted 50 seed and replicated it, and at each different sowing time. And then I collected data on plant emergence, culm number. So culm just being the big seed, tall seed-bearing structures of the grass, and canopy cover in that 1 meter row at the end of the first, and in case the first 6 years experiment, second season. So some of the key findings from that was that site and sowing date had a significant effect on establishment and explained most the variation. September and October were the best sowing dates. So that early-ish spring was the best sowing dates. And on the right are just some figures. So the left column is the barring up site and the right column is Dean. And you can kind of see with the box plots there, how there are different parameters, plant emergence, culm number, and canopy cover varied. So there were other months that did lead to reasonably good plant emergence, not all that different from September and October, but generally across most parameters that had the highest median and the lowest kind of risk of complete failure. And that was kind of as what was expected, because we need that good soil moisture, but as well as warm temperatures, soil temperatures for germination. As soon as it got to November, December, planting sowing seed then, temperatures are great, but the soil just dries so quickly, especially because kangaroo grass seed likes to be planted so shallow, so that real topsoil is vulnerable to drying out quickly in the hot weather. So establishment was really poor in those months. But in autumn and winter, we tended to find that the seed in autumn would stay in the soil until the following spring, and then you get some germination and establishment during that September, October period, which you'll see kind of on this next slide. There's a figure showing the mean plant emergence for Smeaton, for the Smeaton ecotype when sown at Dean, and those different shapes and lines just represent different sowing dates. And you can just see they all shoot up in plant emergence in that September, early October period. There were some cases where seed sown in autumn, more so March, for example, did germinate in March or April because there was a good soil moisture, the temperatures were still there, but those seedlings were really vulnerable to the winter conditions and never really survived the winter. So you can get some establishment and emergence in autumn, but you want to maximize, you want to give the seedlings the best chance of growth and development at a young age, and those warmer conditions in the summer are more supportive for that. So summarizing some key findings there, for the optimal harvest timing, we recommended to strategically target a one-time harvest when approximately 30 to 50% of seed has shed, because early, if you collect the seed too early, a lot of that seed is not yet viable. Look for dark colored seed and the presence of a caryopsis. We also found that viable seed is mostly dormant following fresh harvest. And this really wasn't nothing too new. and will require breakage of dormancy prior to sowing. And there's a range of techniques that can help with dormancy breaking. For optimal sowing timing, it just highlights the importance of timing sowing when seasonal conditions, particularly soil moisture and temperature in the target environment, are conducive to germination and early growth and development. So on Jan Duck, that's early spring, September, October. Moving on to research chapter number 2, that was when we were trying to look at tackling weeds, and it was an evaluation of herbicide phytotoxicity in kangaroo grass. So there's a broad range of techniques that can be used to control weeds. Chemical use isn't typically, especially when it comes to kind of native plants and indigenous farming systems, a traditional way of controlling weeds. But it's just with the recognition that the landscape is significantly altered, and kind of, I guess there was one way, someone from Dja Dja Wurrung explained it well, is that the soil, it's like a hospital situation, and the use of chemicals or herbicide is like a hospital, like you're just fixing the symptoms, and then longer term, hopefully you won't have to kind of use them. So that's why we thought we'll take a look at herbicides and try to identify herbicides that might be safe for kangaroo grass, but effective at controlling weeds. So here is a shot of a crop of kangaroo grass out on Dja Dja Wurrung country at the end of winter, and this is in their establishing year. And you can just see it's overrun there by what was mostly annual ryegrass, so grasses. Because in winter, kangaroo grass goes dormant, so it's really susceptible to just being overrun by weeds. This is at the end of summer an establishing crop, so you've got some thistles and that growing through. There's some wild oats at the front there. Whereas this is a photo of the remnant stand I talked about earlier. And you can see that an established stand is really dominant, and there's not too many weeds through there. So a big kind of hope is, use and get on top of weeds during that establishment is going to be most important, but then the crop will take care of itself once it's established. And that was seen at commercial growers up in Northeast Victoria. This is an established seed crop they've got up there, and you can just see it's thick as, no issue with weed there once it's kind of well established. So the aim of this was to investigate the phytotoxicity, so like the ability to cause damage of herbicides to kangaroo grass at 3 different development stages. We wanted to look at newly emerged spring active plants. So when the plant's quite young, we wanted to look at mature plants, so the mature spring active plants. And we also wanted to look at winter dormant plants and see if applying herbicides during winter dormancy, if there's any if kangaroo grass is protected during that period because it's kind of not physiologically as active. This is a list of the herbicides we used. So we had 19 different herbicides. They were a mix of selective and non-selective and broad spectrum herbicides. So got the active ingredients on the left there, the rate and the target plants. So the dicots, your broadleafs, your grasses, the monocots, and then your broad spectrum herbicides. The methodology was just replicated trials and block designs, and we applied herbicides to a 2x4 meter plot and then collected data on visual damage scores and plant survival for experiment 1, visual damage scores, and column number for the other 2 experiments. So I'm just skipping past all the figures from this chapter and because of time. Here is some of the key findings. So we found that a broad range of herbicides caused little phytotoxicity to kangaroo grass, with a known ability to control many problem weeds. So the rate that we applied the kangaroo grass in the experiment were label rates for controlling problematic weeds in agri-cropping or pasture settings, as per the chemical label, and kind of, I guess, the research that those companies have done. Most of the safe herbicides were the ones that target dicots or broadleafs, which is as expected because they target broadleafs and not as much grasses. So what we were really interested in was if there was any herbicides that target grasses that are safe for kangaroo grass, because grass is often the more problematic ones in a grass crop. And there was a couple, propyzamide and pyroxasulfone, and those ones, yeah, promising, but they mostly rely on root uptake and control young weeds. So there's some limitations there. For the non-selectives, there was a couple that had good safety as well, and some to avoid for sure, like glyphosate. The ones that had high phytotoxicity but have an asterisk next to them, there were a couple where applying during winter dormancy, there seemed to be some protection offered. So research chapter 3, my final chapter, was an evaluation of agronomically important traits in kangaroo grass ecotypes originating on or near Janduck. Ecotypes, I've talked about a bit. Yeah, accessions, there's a few different terms used from them, but yeah, one species, but there's locally adapted ecotypes of kangaroo grass. So we wanted to evaluate agronomically important traits of kangaroo grass when grown at 2 sites, again, Dean and Barringer. And there's just a map of the locations of the different ecotypes. And we've kind of just ranked them in rainfall terms. So for northern Dja Dja Wurrung country, #1 there in lower rainfall, and then the southern locations, higher rainfall. And this was because past literature and also Dja Dja Wurrung knowledge that there are differences potentially in seed production and different attributes of kangaroo grass. So we planted seedlings in plots and collected data on different, what we deemed agronomically important traits. So culm number, seed shed, percentage of viable seed, an important one, viable seed yield per meter squared, seed size, and plant height. So here is a figure here of some of the mean values for the different agronomically important traits, showing the significance of ecotype origin. And you can see here, highlighted in the yellow for the p-value, anything to be considered significant under 0.05. So culm number, there was significant difference in culm number between ecotypes, as well as number of seed shed, number of viable seed shed, percentage of seed shed being viable, plant height, and importantly, viable seed yield. So even on Dja Dja Wurrung country, growing the different ecotypes in common environments will still, those ecotypes expressed differences. So that indicates that there's a kind of genetic kind of influence there on these agronomically important traits. I've put asterisks next to a couple of the parameters there, and that meant that site was significant also. So for example, for culm number and number of seed shed, they were both much higher at Dean, the higher rainfall and cooler site. Not necessarily that might have been all the reason why. There could be differences in the soil fertility and things like that between the 2 sites. So it just shows that those are site specific. But an important kind of finding was that the viable seed yield, it didn't vary between sites. So even though ecotypes, when grown at Dean, produced more culms and shed more total seed, they didn't actually produce more viable seed yield than at Barringer. Another big finding, so I guess from that, a big finding is that higher yielding ecotypes, such as here in terms of viable seed yield, bought it yielded the highest at both Barringup and Dean, kind of indicating that you can, if you identify higher yielding ecotypes, that is conserved when grown at different environments. And there's a bit more to look into, I think, with that, but it's quite I guess, an exciting finding. This was only replicated over one season, and we're hoping, even though my PhD is done now, that's when we get the next honours or master student in, and I think we've got one coming to go through this experiment again this next season, so we can kind of validate results and try to figure out some questions that we still have. Another thing I'll just point out was that seed shed was delayed and more prolonged at Dean, the southern, more cooler site. So there, the lines that are filled are Barringup, and the dashed lines are at Dean, and there was about a month delay there. So that just highlights that, you know, the importance of monitoring a kangaroo grass stand or crop for signs of seed shed when thinking about harvest, because it does vary on based on environmental factors. Hotter, warmer environmental sites will shed seed earlier, and the same in different seasons. Hotter, drier seasons tend to have earlier seed shed. So I think I've mentioned those findings there. So geographic location did not influence the expression of what we deemed the most important agronomic trait, viable seed yield. So genetic variation can potentially be exploited to maximize viable seed yield through the selection and growing of high-yielding ecotypes. So I concluded kind of my PhD, I guess, with some more future research needs to kind of guide the production of kangaroo grass as a broadacre crop. So we want to determine optimal sowing rates and target plant densities for competitive and high-yielding crop. So even in that photo there of crop out at Dja Dja Wurrung country, you can see between the rows there's a bit of space, but that's good because the tussocks will grow out. But we found within the rows they were planted a bit close together and ended up out competing with each other. So you'd rather, you know, spread over a larger area. So try to understand the target plant densities is important for maximizing the use of your planting resources. Better understand how the genetic environmental management factors increase the proportion of seed filling with the caryopsis. So I think I said at the Dean site, they produced a much higher number of seed, but at both sites, the seed yield of caryopsis, or the grains, were the same. And that was because at Dean, even though it produced a lot more seed diaspores, there was a lot of those, or a higher percentage, were empty. So there's potential to kind of better understand that and encourage more seed diaspores filling with seed. Investigate how biomass management can be used to maximize seed production. So that's the use of things like grazing, fire, because over time, a kangaroo grass crop, similar to natural stands, might reduce in productivity if it becomes rank. So just learning a bit more about that and how it affects seed production. And on a more kind of holistic, systemic kind of mindset, better understand how native perennial seed crops fit into contemporary farming systems, so to support farmer uptake. So it's a perennial plant. Once it's kind of there, it's going to be there. You can't, you're not going to rotate it and come through and plant another crop where you've got kangaroo grass. So thinking about, you know, where in a farming system kangaroo grass can best fit is another important area. Just touching on a couple of implications of the PhD. My research helped inform a seasonal calendar and plant and crop guide produced internally by Dja Dja Wurrung, and also informed the crop establishment at their new farm up in northern Dja Dja Wurrung country. So for example, the lit review and research chapter helped inform planting time, and the herbicide chapter helped inform weed management. So yeah, some really exciting kind of outcomes and kind of things being put into practice by Dja Dja Wurrung. I will say that this project and my contribution is just such a small part of, the knowledge, and Dja Dja Wurrung really, are leading in all other areas of kangaroo grass in terms of its production as a crop. So yeah, I'll probably just leave it at that for now because we're right on time for hopefully maybe a couple of questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dylan. That was fantastic. It's like what a wealth of information you've provided us, and I'm sure there are as many questions as answers, as should be the case. Of course, I can. Someone has Colin Cook has put one in the chat, so perhaps I'll start with that, which is: did you investigate Demeter sensitivity to fluoropropionate herbicide? Sorry.
Yeah, no, we didn't. So it was hard to kind of test, do all the herbicides. We kind of wanted to limit to more I guess, the ones commonly used across cropping landscapes of Dja Dja Wurrung country. But if you suspect that there could be some safety to kangaroo grass on that one, then by all means, let me know, and we could, be something we look at.
It's a herbicide used for selective control of serrated tussock, so it's quite widely used in central Victoria. There is an indication on the label that native grasses can be sensitive to it if it's applied at too high a rate. Given that it's spread around a hell of a lot, usually with aerial spraying programs. If Demeter is sensitive to it, some people might want to reconsider whether it's applied in such broad scale, broad acre means.
All right, well, thank you. Yes, I know it's like certainly like in the Melbourne context, fluke gets thrown around a lot in the management of our Western grassland reserves and areas, like not in agronomic sort of situations, but just in grassland management context. Peter McGrath asks, are you suggesting that spraying is necessary before establishment?
Yeah, good question. No, I would say it's probably not necessary. It's just a tool that can be used, and I guess on a broad acre scale, there are herbicides, for example, through even our research at the controlling broadleaf weeds, that are very safe for kangaroo grass. So it's then a decision for a grower to kind of decide what's the most economical kind of way to control the weeds. And often that is the application of herbicides. For large broadacre scale cropping. On smaller scale, I guess there can be more kind of opportunity for different techniques. But yeah, the important thing is it's all part of it. Broader integrated weed management kind of program or strategy. So I know a lot of our learnings is just like how much you really want to deplete that seed bank in the years leading up. So there's different things like growing different crops or cover crops or things like that, or techniques like that can reduce that seed bank. But yeah, weeds are certainly a challenge, and there's no one answer, that's for sure.
No, and so on the cover of Weeds being on the topic of controlling weeds, Cat Rawlings wants to know if you considered scalping as a method of weed control.
Yeah, not within the kind of restrictions of my PhD project, but I know that there's some bit of research out there on that, and that it has been used in restoration in the past. I think at even one of our research sites that was given a crack at the first year just to kind of try to clear the weeds away a bit. So yeah, again, another potentially another potential option for weed management. Yeah.
Indeed. All right. Lots and lots of questions. What spacing do you recommend for Demeter plants? Asks Stephen Murphy.
Yeah, good question. So that's, I guess, kind of something that we learned throughout my research. I wouldn't recommend, for that last experiment, we planted 16 seedlings into a meter squared, and definitely at Dean, that was way too high. So they were planted 25 centimeters apart. So they just outcompeted each other, and you ended up just with a few dominant tussocks in that space. So even out on the sites, we were finding that the row spacing, the space between the rows was, I think it was about kind of like 50, 75 centimeters. And that was sometimes too much space, but within the rows, the plants were much closer together and they were out competing as well. So they do have the ability to kind of fill in space. It's kind of that balancing act of, you don't want to plant them too close because they can outcompete each other and they won't kind of be as productive as they can. But if you plant too far away, then there's more kind of risk of weeds and things like that. But a thing we couldn't really do in this project, but there is also that ability for recruitment over time. So if you have them a bit further apart over time, you might get some younger plants filling in the space as well. But yeah, one of the future research areas that we identified was into those target plant densities.
Okay. Jerry asks if you investigated Demeter avicenacea, which is a much more narrow distribution, and it's a two-part question. And also, what drives Demeter triandra cosmopolitan dominance, given its dormancy and inviability?
Yeah, good questions. Thank you. First question, no, my project was just, and the Dja Dja Wurrung project, DJAARA decided to focus on the one species, Demeter triandra. I am aware of that species though, and that it is, narrowly restricted, but I think northern Dja Dja Wurrung country somewhere, and because when I was out there a couple of weeks ago, a farmer was talking to me about it, saying you should look into this one, so yeah, I'll keep an eye out, and if anyone's got any info or anything or interest in that, I'm keen to learn more. As a species, kangaroo grass is quite dominant. I guess once it's established, it's very commanding of the space that it's where it is. There's some interesting research out by his name's Prober. I think I referenced it in my lit review paper, but talking about how Demeter triandra might have the ability to take up nitrogen in forms not so available to other plants as kind of a way to outcompete plants once it's kind of there. And then I guess it's just adaptation to such a wide range of climatic conditions and soil conditions. I mean, like, it doesn't like being too wet or things like that, but generally it's found, in tropical Australia, it's found in Tasmania, it's found up in Tangara in the Alps. So it really has that ability to adapt. And yeah, I guess just its leaf area, like out on Dja Dja Wurrung country, when I walk through the kangaroo grass, those established tussocks, they just nothing would have a chance to kind of penetrate up through them once they're there.
True. Just on the cosmopolitanness or internationalness of it, did you look at, is this being done anywhere else in the world? Like you've told us about Australia, but what about Africa or South Africa or Asia?
Yeah, so lots of the ecological and restoration kind of literature, and that is out of South Africa. It's used, not so much. There wasn't much literature that I could find on its use in agricultural kind of settings, especially as like seed production crop for its seed. for like grain or things like that. Other native grass species in Australia, there's been some more research into them a bit, but yeah, not too much I could come across in terms of Demeter Trandra's use as seed production crop on a broad acre scale.
Okay.
And that could largely, I guess, be due because it is so low yielding. You know, a lot of people with our other conventional crops, like your wheat, your big grain crops, wheat, rice, and maize, like when it comes to food security, they get all the focus and things like that. And yeah, it hasn't really had that economic kind of incentive to kind of, I guess, warrant a lot of research for its use as seed production.
Alan wants to know if you tested smoke or fire to improve germination.
Thanks, Alan. Was that Alan, was it?
It was.
Thanks, Alan. Good question. So we didn't in any of my research chapters. In my review, I looked at, found lots of literature looking at, smoke and fire and its role in breaking down dormancy. So yeah, with kangaroo grass seed, it seems like it's got both like a physical dormancy imposed, but also a physiological dormancy imposed, which means there's something in the chemistry that prevents it from germinating. One of the big ways that dormancy is broken down is simply storing the seed over a period of time. And it's a process called after ripening. And during that, the seed just sitting around for months, there's a breakdown of whatever that chemical kind of inhibitor on germination is, and you get germination increase. So one of the recommendations for dormancy breakdown is simply just storing seeds. So not if you harvest seed, you know, in December or January, wait until at least, the next season to sow it, potentially the season after. You might even get more dormancy breakdown through after ripening. There was other dormancy breaking techniques, smoke, fire, and some positive results for that. That smoke can, help reduce dormancy. And also the application of different, I guess, plant hormones as well were found to have an effect as well. So definitely an area that's, of interest there to break down that dormancy.
Indeed. All right. Harvesting and processing techniques. There must be like, many stories to tell about like what might be a good way of going about it or.
Yeah, so that's something, again, that Dja Dja Wurrung, an aspect of the project or the more holistic picture that they're looking into. My research mostly focused very much at that product or establishments and seed production side of kangaroo grass as a crop. But yeah, that is a challenge. That harvesting is a challenge because, you know, the way it's been done in the past is through the use of mostly a brush harvester so a little bit of equipment you can pull behind your ute, and it's a big brush and it just collects all the culms and the seed into kind of a bag, and then from there you can start the processing process. But that collects a lot of a large quantity of trash material and that as well. So it's, you know, different to like a wheat crop where the header goes through and you're collecting just kind of the grain and everything else gets thrown behind. So it's much easier. You got kind of the end product there. So then it's a process of, you know, threshing and using vacuums or things like that to sort through and get that final grain. And yeah, there are different groups in that think they've mastered that, but not my area of expertise for sure.
Okay. From B. Imogen, any thoughts on preferability for growth on different parent rock types? So did you have a sense of like what the soil was giving you, sandstone land versus granite country?
Yes, I did. We did do soil profiling at both our sites, at Dean and Barringup. I would have to go check those to report back all the characteristics of it. I know that kangaroo grass has the ability to be well adapted to such a wide range of soils. it seems that kind of the biggest factors influencing its kind of vigorous and productivity, and that is yeah, temperature and soil moisture. If you have good soil moisture, as long as it's not waterlogged soil or that, and you have warm temperatures, it just in kind of whatever soil seems to thrive. But I guess, yeah, that's an area that I would be keen to learn more about as well.
So would, this might sound mad, is it irrigation a possibility?
Irrigation, yeah. So that's something we actually did. So Dja Dja Wurrung, their property now where they're growing kangaroo grass, it's up in near with old dairies and up there near Lockington, and they have access to irrigation and you know, there is a kind of, it could be used as a tool, especially during that establishment stage, if it was available, because the seed really needs that good soil moisture to germinate at that top soil. And, you know, you don't want to be going out planting seed and then, you know, there's no good soil moisture there, but you get warm conditions and then the seed might just desiccate, or, you know, there's those susceptibilities. Some of the commercial growers use irrigation to promote flowering and seed production. So they use it right before kind of flowering and that, and get kind of a bit of a boost there. But yeah, for kind of, I guess, a lot of farmers, irrigation isn't really a viable or an option for a lot of dry land farming systems. But if you're sowing kangaroo grass, I guess that sowing time would be, the window would be widened if you had access to irrigation, because you could probably sow in December or whatnot, and then you can irrigate it, and there's that, you cancel out that risk of it drying out, so you'll get,
Yeah, right. So we're almost done with all the questions. I'm sure there'll be more though. Level of interest in kangaroo grass from farmers. Have you had yeah, is it likely to be a popular crop? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, both the field sites at Dean and Barringup, they were leased off farmers who were very interested or very happy to host the experiments, because, you know, they were interested in learning more and seeing how it might fit in their farming systems. So I think that's a big next stage of the process, is to kind of work out how, you know, the idea of growing kangaroo grass as a broadacre crop, I think, for Dja Dja Wurrung was because, you know, a lot of the land is owned by farmers now, and to get it back into country, you want to kind of develop it as a commercially viable crop. So I think it's really just selling the story of kangaroo grass, and I guess the ways that it could be a commercial viable crop. Like, you've got the obvious, it's high value seed, but if you start growing it, more and more people start growing it, they might flood the market, and seed price might just drop and things like that. So it's kind of looking at those broader, trying to understand more, so we can tell the story about how it could fit and benefit a farming system. So, you know, it's protecting biodiversity. You know, you might be able to plant it across tree lines or fence lines, where, for example, in like a wheat crop, along tree lines, there's trees along, like, the wheat doesn't go too well anyway, so you might look at planting kangaroo grass along there, and just you know, helping against soil erosion, things like that. So kind of looking at kind of all the other benefits as well.
Okay, so a lot of advantages that we could use to sell it to as a narrative, like you said, or that the DJAARA can use to sell it as a narrative too. Yes, indeed. Brilliant. Are there, John Bradford, do you need to control macropods from grazing in seed production areas to get crops established?
Yeah, good question. Kangaroo grass, like, I hear so many different stories about how it got its name as kangaroo grass, and one of them is because kangaroos love it, love grazing on it. Fortunately, at both our field sites, there was no pressure from macropods, so mostly the pressure came from weeds. But I know, yeah, that is a problem, and even other people that I know that have kangaroo grass, they've find that an issue as well. But yeah, so something to keep an eye out, really. But I think your big problem, the big challenge during that establishment phase is weeds. And once it is established, then a bit of light grazing at the right time can be useful for its productivity. So,
oh, very good. All right. Are there more questions that from the we've see how long we can keep Dylan here? He'll be here to midnight at this rate. It's if that's all, perhaps we should move on to the next phase of the evening, and thank Dylan very, very much for such a comprehensive account of Thermidor agronomy, and we hope to see more of your research in the future, because it's going to help change the world, which is a good thing, I think. Indeed. All right. Thank you very much, Dylan.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for everyone for joining. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you all, and looking forward to staying connected.
Yes, indeed. And so this talk will be up on the web in days to come. So I'll send you the link in due course. It's about it's 7:48 now. So if we take 10 minutes and come back at 8 o'clock or just before 8 o'clock for our Grassy Plains Network general meeting. Until then, see you all in 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Dylan.